pitfalls to avoid for the Houston Texans in the 2023 NFL draft that could hinder their future. And Cody and I talk about the Houston Texans meeting with the top quarterbacks coming up.
And to tie it all in, we want to develop a great team here that we can deliver wins to the city of Houston. We want to deliver a championship here to the city of Houston, and that's what it'll be about.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, everybody, to a Tuesday episode of the Locked On Texan podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure you are subscribed to the Locked On Texan podcast on YouTube and all of your major podcasting platforms. I'm John Hickman, of course, joined by none other than Sports Illustrated's own and Texan Credential media member Cody Davis, here to discuss the opportunity that Cody had with head coach DeMeco Ryans. Got a question out of his appearance at the Rockets game on Sunday night.
Woo, boy.
But you know what? As bad as the Rockets game was, if DeMeco Ryans at any point, wanted to be maybe a ninth man on the roster, does have a nice little shot from the free throw line. Knock that down, nothing but net. So that's nice. We'll also look at the top 5 pitfalls to avoid for the Houston Texans. But there's no way we can start this show without looking at the Texans meeting with the top quarterback, scheduled the top-30 visit with C.J. Stroud. They also have they're going to meet with Bryce Young. They already met with Will Levis. Cody, the quarterback position is the talk of the town for the Houston Texans. You're around this franchise a lot more than others are. Meeting with C.J. Stroud. Texans are going to get with Bryce Young on Wednesday. What does all of that mean for the Houston Texans?
That they're keeping their options open, and I love it. And I also want to add to that list that they have also met with Hendon Hooker, and I'm not too sure about Anthony Richardson. If they have him. Oh, go ahead.
I do want to say with Anthony Richardson, I'm glad you brought that up. A visit with Richardson is no longer scheduled.
Okay.
Per a source. This is coming from a article that Aaron Wilson, wrote. I'm sorry, wrote, but there is still a possibility for a private workout.
Okay,
that still remains an option. Make sure you guys go follow the great Aaron Wilson at Aaron Wilson _NFL.
Gotcha. But look, the Houston Texans, as of right now, they have already met or are projected to meet with 4 of the top 5 quarterbacks coming in this year's draft. And John, I do like the fact that Nick Caserio and DeMeco Ryans are keeping their options open, because I do believe they are in a win-lose situation, if that makes sense. Because look, I think we all can agree that everybody has the same top 5 quarterbacks in the top 5 coming into this draft. However, I look at one of these 4 other quarterbacks and I think to myself, he is not like the other. But when I take a look at the fact that Nick Caserio and DeMeco Ryans are keeping their options open, I like it because first and foremost, John, this is something that Nick Caserio and DeMeco Ryans have talked about ever since both of those guys became on one accord. Ever since the introductory press conference that they had in early February, they talked about how they didn't want to get stuck to one player or get tied to one player. They wanted to make sure that they do their homework. And when I say the Houston Texans are in a win-lose situation, I look at this from a standpoint of, when I look at these 5 quarterbacks, I look at CJ and I look at Bryce. I think we all can agree that both of those guys are franchise caliber changing quarterbacks. When you take a look at Hooker, when you take a look at Richardson, you look at 2 guys who they might not be ready to come in and make an impact for your franchise as of right now. But when you take a look at the potential offense that we are expecting to see out of Bobby Sloyd, when you take a look at the fact that DeMeco Ryans is going to try to replicate the style of offense that he saw in San Francisco, you're looking at it from a standpoint of that being an offense where it could be it could be a plug and play type of scenario for a quarterback. When I take a look at Hooker, when I take a look at Anthony Richardson, I look at both of those guys as quality starting quarterbacks, to where once you build and establish a system, they can thrive. And then, no disrespect to Will Levis, but I don't see him like I see those other guys. First and foremost, look, I'm not trusting anybody that's going to put mayonnaise in their coffee and drink it. That's a big no to me. But at the same time, I don't think his skill set, I don't think and it's just me, from what I see on tape, what I'm being told, and all this other good stuff, I don't think his draft capital, his draft status hold value to the other four guys. But John, once again, man, I love the fact that the Houston Texans are doing their homework. I understand we are all expecting them to go CJ or Bryce, but if something changed and they go Hendon Hooker, they go Anthony Richardson, that's going to give them a lot more flexibility on how they want to build this roster through the draft, especially with that number 2 overall pick.
Yeah, I think that if they go between Anthony Richardson, I think Houston uses that number 2 pick to maybe trade back and get some more picks. If they go Hendon Hooker, then I would expect that Houston would went Hendon Hooker at 33 and possibly use 2 and 12 and maybe look at 12 and trading back and gathering more picks, which is something that I can't wait to talk about. But if either one of those quarterbacks are taken for Houston, it's not at 2, and I don't think it'll be at 12, especially with Hendon Hooker.
Yeah.
You don't risk
definitely.
You don't risk number 12 with Hendon Hooker, who I think will still need some more time to get healthier, then come in a situation where he can get time. I think the only 2 quarterbacks that you would bank on starting day one is Bryce and CJ. I don't even think that's the case with Anthony Richardson.
No, I was going to say, which, by the way, this goes back to something you and I talked about last week. If you don't go if you don't go CJ or Bryce at number 2, maybe you go Will Anderson at number 2.
So, and I just think that at 2, the Texans should go quarterback. But I'm also a guy that understands that this is an opportunity for DeMeco Ryans to create his own path and way. And so we will see. And I like that Houston is interviewing, which that's what they're supposed to do. This isn't oh my gosh, they're not interviewing one guy or they have they favor one quarterback. They have to be prepared. Houston didn't personally attend CJ or Bryce Young's pro day. Houston did, but DeMeco Ryans and Nick Caserio did not personally attend those 2 pro days. They were at, I believe, SMU or U of H's pro day.
Nick and Frank Ross, if I'm not mistaken, were at UH pro day.
Okay, then somebody was at SMU, but they didn't get a chance to personally get out there. So this is an opportunity for them, who's picking that 2, to get a better understanding and outlook on the 2 top quarterbacks that's coming out. Of course, like we mentioned, I got CJ, got Bryce coming up on Wednesday. I love it. There's no room for panic. There's no need to question whether or not Houston is going to go with one or the other based off of, I don't know, a personality. I think that one will go 1 first overall, and they will be ready for whoever falls at number 2. It's just good to get a better look at the guy that you eventually will end up with. And so I like it. I also look at not having Anthony Richardson scheduled for a interview right now. I think that is a good thing, honestly. I think that if you really like Anthony Richardson, it'll be scheduled. So we still have to be ready for Houston to pivot. Anything can happen. But if it's not the top 2 quarterbacks, I would expect it'll be Hendon Hooker later in the draft. And Houston would use some of those, 2 and 12. They would use those picks on maybe upgrading at edge, which is something that they need. There's no thought around it, no fight around it. And then using 12 to maybe orchestrate moving around, gaining some more picks in this upcoming year's NFL draft.
And speaking of how anything can happen, I do want to mention this as well. On yesterday, Bryce Young did meet with the Indianapolis Colts. As we all know, they are picking 4. There are still some rumors on whether or not the Carolina Panthers are going to trade from number 1. I don't think it's going to happen, but like you said, John, anything is possible. But that is something else that you might want to keep your eye on, because if they don't go CJ or Bryce at 2, that means we will be playing against one of those quarterbacks for the next 10 years at least.
Oh, listen, also running back Keandre Miller has scheduled a visit with the Texans, along with cornerback Julius Brents. He has a top 30 visit with the Houston Texans. Also, safety Brian Branch out of Alabama. He has a scheduled visit with the Houston Texans. And we could also look at Quentin Johnson as a name on the radar for the Houston Texans as well, the wide receiver out of TCU.
Yes,
Ran a
sir.
4.45, 4.46
Yes,
at his
sir.
pro day. And I think his 4.46 may help him out in the long run for his future. I think there was questions around his 40 time, and so that'll help out. And we'll see how Houston attacks the wide receiver position in this year's draft. This episode is brought to you by Built Bar. Built Bar is a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. Go to BuiltBar.com and use promo code LOCKEDON15 and you'll get 15% off your next order. Covered in 100% real chocolate. Amazing flavors to choose from. And you can pick it up at Walmart or your local Sam's Club as well. Built Bar, the best protein bar on the market.
Welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen, to this Tuesday installment of Locked On Texans. And if you heard yesterday's show, you saw John and myself. We had a little fun revisiting some mistakes that the Houston Texans made throughout their draft history. You already know the one I'm never going to let go, Vince Young in 2006. John hates when I bring it up, but it's okay. I understand it, but I think we all can agree that the Houston Texans have made several mistakes throughout their franchise. When you take a look at the draft, one of the biggest ones that me and John talked about, I don't think get revisited enough is the fact that you used in 2019, you used a third-round pick on tight end, Kahele Warren. Where is Kahele Warren as right now? Nobody knows. However, John wanted to look at some mistakes that the Houston Texans need to avoid to make sure they come away with a very good draft in 2023.
Absolutely. Top 5 pitfalls to avoid if you are the Houston Texans. I'm going to go with number 5 to 1. I'm going to say overdrafting running backs before the 5th round.
Something else we just talked about.
Yeah, so you got Damian Pierce, got Devin Singletary, Mike Boone is on the roster, Dare Ogunbowale is on the roster. I think that, with the Texans having 6 picks currently within the first 4 rounds, running backs will be there at pick 161 in the 5th round. I also believe that they will be available at pick 188 in the 6th round. The talent will be there. There's no rush to draft when this team already has good backs on the roster. Number 4, don't trade back from 33. Now, I like 33. I really do like 33. I think 33 is a spot where you can get some good players right there. Like right now, I think Keon White will be available. I think Will McDonald will be available. I think Zay Flowers will be available, a wide receiver position need. I think Tittman, the center, will be available. And, right now we have 2 centers on the roster where we don't really know their future with this team. Scott Quisenberry, Michael Dater, and actually we still have Jimmy Maurice on the roster as well. Also, I think Trenton Simpson, the linebacker, will be available at 33 as well. So I like 33. I like 33, maybe a little bit more than 12, honestly, because at 12, there's still a high expectation for you to nail it. I think at 33, that does give you the option to get the best player available and not necessarily go with your need. So 33 is a great spot for the Houston Texans. At 3, undervaluing positions and draft needs. Now, last year, the Texans really needed somebody to help with the run, and they traded back from 13 to 15 with the 15th overall pick. They drafted Kenyon Green. But at 13, Philly drafted Jordan Davis, and I think Jordan Davis would have been amazing alongside Malik Collins last year, helping stop the run. I think when he was in the game for Philly only allowed, I think, maybe along the terms of 3.6 yards per carry or something along those lines. So don't undervalue what you need, right? Don't think to yourself, well, we can get it later in the draft. If you can get it at that moment in time, go ahead and get it. I think wide receiver and the edge position are real positions of need for this team, but so is linebacker and so is center. I just gave you Keon White. I just gave you Zay Flowers, Tittman, Trenton Simpson. Those are positions of needs, and I think this is a draft that is deep in those positions, and you want Houston to get the best player available when it's their time to pick. Number 2, don't be scared to trade up for a player you think can be a difference maker. Now, with Nick Caserio, I'm not worried about that. I'll tell you why. Carter, we look at John Mechie whenever he's able to play football again, and I was watching some highlights from him a couple of days ago, man. Number 1, I'm not worried about Bryce Young's arm strength. Number 2, John Mechie was a hell of a receiver in college. And what did Nick Caserio do?
Traded up
for him. Also, look at Christian Harris last year. What did he do?
Traded up
for him. And so I believe both of those players will be a part of the, oh, wow, Houston turned it around roster. Oh, wow, Houston got some talent, and they can actually compete roster and that type of future. And so for Nick, don't be afraid to be who you are. You are a guy that believes in players, and if you have the optionality that you have, like you spoke about, go and get the players you believe can turn around this franchise. But you know what number 1 is?
Gotta be.
Don't pass on a quarterback at number 2. I don't think I need an explanation for that. I don't, but I'm going to give you one. Listen, between Bryce Young and between C.J. Stroud, and I think everybody is big on both of those quarterbacks. And by the way, saying that this quarterback class isn't talented or isn't like star-studded quarterback class, I think that is a ridiculous statement. But between Bryce and CJ, one of those guys you should walk away with as your quarterback when this draft is over. That's my thought and belief system. And I think that will be the top pitfall Houston can avoid and won't hinder their future and the success they can have under DeMeco Ryans. My top 5, ladies and gentlemen. So hopefully with that top 5, Houston is out there listening. And again, I really do like Keon White. If he's available at maybe like 30, and NFL guys, they talk, hey man, he may be off the board. If he's available at 30, then you know what? You go to number 2. You trade up for him. I like Will McDaniels. I think McDonald, I think he'll be available at 33. 33 is a position where you can get a very good player for this franchise.
I love all 5. Well, I love 4 of the 5 that you said, except for don't trade back from 33. Because the way you view 33 is how I feel about number 12. Just don't trade number 12. I feel like if anything, like we mentioned, number 2, you get a quarterback at number 12. You might have an opportunity to get arguably the best wide receiver, the best pass catcher in this draft. And when you take a look at the offensive side of the ball for the Houston Texans, a quarterback and wide receiver are their top needs. And this is a franchise, well, the last regime, before they messed things up, they had a franchise quarterback and a franchise wide receiver as well. And that's how I feel about 12. I would be okay if you trade down from 33. Let's say you drop down to somewhere in the low 40s or whatever, and you get an additional 3rd or 4th round pick back. I would be okay with that. Nick Caserio is going to will and deal because that's what he does. But I agree with everything that you said. However, 33, I'll be okay with it, John. I will be okay.
I'm gonna give you a 6th pitfall. I'm gonna give you one more.
Don't listen to Cody at the draft.
No, well, don't listen to neither one of us. We are podcasts. We are
journalists,
broadcasters, we're journalists. We are not GMs, but don't be afraid to take a top tight end.
Wow, really? Wait. Make that make sense, John, because you saw what they did in free agency.
I saw what they did.
You already got TQ. Even though I think this is the last year that Brother Jordan has, he still shows some promise at times. Why is that? That's an interesting theory that nobody's really talking about.
I say that, and again, I look at the tight end position opposite of how I look at the running backs. You can find a running back. But with the Texans having 6 picks in the first 4 rounds, I wouldn't be mad if they, looked at round 4 and said, we like a guy right here.
Wow.
I wouldn't be mad. And I'll give you one more. Don't be afraid to draft Jimmy Ward's replacement for the future.
I can see that.
And I like Jimmy Ward as a player. I really do. But
isn't Jimmy Ward like 30 or something?
Yeah, I don't think Jimmy Ward is going to be around for a very long time.
Yeah.
And I think that there are some safeties in this draft. I think there's some cornerbacks in this draft that could potentially move to safety and be, damn good. So just don't be afraid to add to the position. That's what I should say. Add to the position that you already have filled, because this is a revolving door in the NFL. Injuries happens, things happen, contracts come up. And so between tight end and safety, and I think safety is also a position that they, in those first 6 picks, they may address, but you also got 161, 188. You still be able to find some good safeties back there that can sit maybe for a while. But don't be afraid to bring in some guys that you already have a number 1 or 2 at, i.e. Dalton Schultz is your number 1 tight end. Jimmy Ward is your number 1 starting safety. Don't be afraid to draft some guys in those positions. I am really excited to see what Nick Caserio and D'Amico Ryans and the entire coaching staff and scout staff does in this NFL draft. I think 12 and 33 is very interesting. I really do like those 2 picks for Houston, and I also like the third round, the second, third round, like around that time where you can get some players, man. So they got the optionality and flexibility to draft some great talent, bring them to the city of Houston to compete for the AFC South Championship this year. Thanks for making the Locked On Texans your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes. From free agency to the draft, salary cap management, and much more. Join NFL experts Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino as they take you through what it's like to build a successful NFL franchise every Monday through Friday. Find Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes everywhere, wherever you get your podcasts, and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, D'Amico, you have a shot at a chance to get $5,000 for the Clutch City Foundation.
I love that clip.
Man, welcome back in.
Look, when you see him shoot it,
like
you hit,
the confidence. Did you see how he just walked up? Let's run that back really quick.
All right, D'Amico, you have a shot at a chance to get $5,000 for the Clutch City Foundation.
No hesitation, no nothing, man. Just you gotta
got what 3 games left. Go ahead and sign D'Amico Ryans.
3 games left tonight against the Denver Nuggets is that last home game. Of course, I'm gonna be there. They finish off the season, the last 2 games against the Hornets and the Washington Wizards, and then Lord have mercy, this crazy off season is going to start. But this isn't Locked On Rockets. Be sure to go check out our guy Jackson over at Locked On Rockets for more about that. However, on Sunday, Houston Texans head coach D'Amico Ryans had an opportunity, as you guys saw, to hit the first shot. And I think the Houston Texans, if I'm not mistaken, are 2-2 with their first shot appearances. Laramie Tunsil and D'Amico Ryans hit the first shot, while Derek Stingley and Keon Green actually missed their first shot. However, of course, we had an opportunity to catch up very briefly with Coach D'Amico Ryans and talk about, what are some of the things he's been doing in the offseason. I had an opportunity to ask him, his very first time going through the draft process as a head coach, and this is what he had to say.
Oh, it's going well. It's a lot of guys working together, right, to make sure that we have a thorough process with the guys that we're evaluating, and come the end of this month, we'll have our chance, have our opportunity to add some really talented guys to our team, so we're fired up about it.
All right. I love the fact, man, once again, how the way he always talk about having so many guys to be a part of every single decision that is going to happen with this organization. And I know I say that a lot, but John, that is real telling to me to let me know how Nick Caserio and D'Amico Ryans are working together, because when David Culley was here, it was just basically Nick Caserio way or the highway. When Lovie Smith and Nick Caserio was here, it was like
clash.
It was a clash. Like, it was a constant clash between both of those guys. And to hear that Nick Caserio, when you speak to him away from DeMeco Ryans, when you speak to DeMeco Ryans away from Nick Caserio, both of those guys are still on one accord. And look, this is a very important NFL draft for the Houston Texans to get this franchise back to a competitive nature and hopefully the best version of this franchise that we have ever seen. And it's going to take both of those guys, as right now, the most important two guys in that franchise in hopes of getting this franchise back on track.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you said it best perfectly there, so I'm not going to add to that. I just don't see Bill O'Brien stepping up and knocking down that free throw. Not with the dribble. Not with the dribble. I can see Lovie Smith knocking it down. Can't see David Culley.
I'm going with my boy David Culley. I'm having faith in David Culley.
Can't see David, but if David Culley makes it, it's backboard.
Of course.
It's a backboard, old school. I think if it's both of them, Lovie Smith and David Culley, backboard, and old men, they tell you that's what it's there for. You got to use it. That type of. But I think Bill O'Brien probably bottom of the net.
No, he gonna hit one of the Rockets power dancers. He gonna he gonna shoot, pop.
Oh my goodness! Thank y'all for checking out today's Locked On Texans podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Locked On Texans and subscribe on YouTube as well. Also on all of the major podcasting platforms where you can find podcasts. Locked On Texans are available. Check us out every Monday through Friday.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. Once again, that's Cody, COTYDAVIS_24. Why 24? Because Kobe Bryant is the GOAT. Feel like I had to say that because the Lakers was just in town and this baby GOAT was in town, but not the GOAT was in town, if that makes sense. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.